You're listening to Alamo City Limits Podcast with Noah Magaro-George, the official San Antonio Spurs podcast of Pounding the Rock in SB Nation.
What's going on, Spurs fans? Welcome back to Alamo City Limits, the official San Antonio Spurs podcast of SB Nation and Pounding the Rock. As always, I'm your host, Noah Magaro-George, and that's my co-host, Damien Bartonek. How are you doing on this spectacular Friday, man?
I'm doing well, brother. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Glad to just be chopping it up about some Spurs hoops, some All-Star stuff. I'm really, really excited, bro. Like, All-Star Weekend is supposed to be so much fun, and this just reminds me, just me and you, chatting it up, just reminds me of just a barbecue with a beer in our hand, just chilling. So I'm excited, brother. Let's do it.
Yeah, just so our listeners are in the loop, we're recording this podcast on Friday, February 18th at about noon Central Time, a little bit later than that, but just about noon Central Time. But let's go ahead and jump into the silver and black content because we have a very different and very special episode in store for you as your San Antonio Spurs hit the 2022 All-Star break. As we all know by now, Dejounte Murray was selected for the All-Star game as an injury replacement for Draymond Green after putting together what might be one of the most impressive and statistical lines in franchise history. I don't know, that's just how I feel about it. And this man is a nightly triple-double threat from the point guard position. He's been on a tear since February began. So without any further ado, let's kick things off, beginning with the question: how does Dejounte's first All-Star season stack up against other first-time All-Stars across franchise history? Dame, I'll go ahead and throw it to you, and we'll look at everybody who's ever been a first-time All-Star with the San Antonio Spurs specifically.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and tackle the first half, and then you can tackle the second half. So David Robinson in year one, at age 24, averaged 24.3 points, 12 rebounds, 2 assists, 3.9 blocks, which after doing research yesterday, Noah, I had the same exact reaction. I was like, how? 4 blocks per game is nuts, 1.7 steals, right? Tim Duncan, year one, age 21, 21.1 points, 11.9 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 2.5 blocks per game. George Gervin, year 5, age 24, 23 points, 5.5 rebounds, 2.9 assists, 1.3 blocks, 1.3 steals. Kawhi Leonard, age 5, Lord have mercy. If you made the All-Star year 5, age 5 is crazy. But no, year 5, age 24, 21.2 points, 6.8 rebounds, 2.6 assists, 1.8 steals, and 1.0 blocks. And then finally, right, the meat and potatoes, the star of this portion of the show, Dejounte Murray, year 6, age 25, 19.9 points, 9.3 assists, 8.3 rebounds, 2.0 steals. The one thing that really stuck out to me, kind of going through this half so far, is Dejounte's on track in terms of the year and the age and just the overall experience level of making his first All-Star team. He's on track with, the bulk of these guys outside of Tim Duncan. You know what I mean? Not to say he's going to be the next Spurs great, right?
Sure.
But in terms of impact, overall stuff in the stat sheet, and really doing everything that the Spurs have asked from him, I'm really impressed with where he stacks up compared to these guys, because these guys were all in kind of similar roles, right? Every guy that I just mentioned was the Spurs' best player, in my opinion, when they made the All-Star team. I think, even the later half, maybe as well. But more so this half, every player was in the same spot Dejounte's in, and they shined. And I think he's shining right now as well. In my last post for Pounding the Rock on the the Bulls preview I wrote, I compared Dejounte to Matt Stafford and Lamar Jackson. And I think in the case of Matt Stafford and Lamar Jackson, they work really well within their scheme, right? Really well within the structure of their offense. And it's the same with a guy like Dejounte Murray. He fits very well what the Spurs ask, what the Spurs need from him. So in totality, I really like how he's played this year. I think he stacks up very well against these guys that these all-time great players in Spurs history. And he's on that trajectory, man. I mean, because this is just year 6 for him. Age 25, and this is really the first year that we've seen from him playing as the guy in San Antonio, right? This is his first season as the engine, and maybe he's not best suited for that role, but right now, Noah, if you told me, coming into the year, Dejounte's going to be doing these kind of things, stuff in the stat sheet, and eventually making the All-Star team in year 1 as the Spurs engine, I would have looked at you crazy. I would have been like, wow, that's a very bold take. So, and for me, Noah, I'm really impressed with Dejounte. I think he stacks up very well. Not to say, again, that he's going to be the next Spurs all-time great, but I'm really impressed with Dejounte this season.
Yeah, I'm impressed with Dejounte Murray. I think where I would push back a little bit, where saying he's on pace with these guys is, Tim Duncan was 21, Tony was 23, George Gervin was 24 for his first NBA All-Star appearance, but he had actually had 3 ABA All-Star appearances before that, so he was also a first-time All-Star in the ABA at age 21. David Robinson was 24, so he's like closer to that age range, so is Kawhi Leonard, but it's important to remember, David Robinson did 2 years of service with the Navy before he joined the Spurs, and he came in like pretty much MVP candidate right away. Like, I don't think Dejounte Murray, again, we're not saying he is or isn't an MVP candidate or anything like that, but I don't really think he's on that same level. And then you look at the rest of these guys, I think the biggest differentiator is Tim Duncan came in year one. Obviously, he had David Robinson. There was a pretty good setup for him, so it's not the same situation as Dejounte Murray is in right now. But Tim Duncan came in. They turned it around. Biggest single-season turnaround in NBA history for any franchise. Tim Duncan spurred that, right? Really, really good. Led them to the playoffs. Obviously, they lost to the Utah Jazz in the first round that year, but it was the start of something really special. David Robinson, same thing. Led the Spurs to the playoffs. Kawhi Leonard led the Spurs to the playoffs, established himself as one of the best players in the NBA, and even though he's not a Spur anymore, clearly a top 5 player. George Gervin, one of the best scorers in NBA history, led the Spurs to the playoffs. So you're looking at all these teams, and again, I'm not saying that DeJounte's in a similar situation. His supporting cast is probably not as good as these guys were, if we're being honest. But the Spurs are 13 games under 500. They'll probably finish the season like 15, 16, 17 games under 500. And so for me, the big differentiator, like I mentioned, is just his impact. While I think the numbers are really pretty, and I do believe he's very impactful. Really good defender, pretty good scorer, really solid facilitator, does everything that you want him to do, especially in a role that's maybe not ideal for him. But I don't think he's a transcendent talent like the guys that we just mentioned. And the other thing that I will say about them is you look at the field goal percentage. Tim Duncan, 55% from the field. George Gervin, 54% from the field. David Robinson, 53% from the field. Kawhi, 51% from the field, 44% from three, higher volume of three-point attempts, and all of them take more free throw attempts. You look at DeJounte, out of all the All-Stars, and we'll go through the rest of them too, because we're going to end up going through 10 guys, which is a nice, pretty round number. I know we like round numbers here. Dejounte Murray has the lowest field goal percentage of any All-Star or first-time All-Star in Spurs history. So I think he has quite a way, and it's not close. Like the next guy next to him, and we'll get into that guy later, Larry Keenan, who I think is sort of forgotten in Spurs history, used to be like the Robin to George Gervin's Batman. His field goal percentage was in like the 47-ish, 48% range. Dejounte Murray is under 46%. So I'm not saying that like he's not as good as these guys. I think he actually, if we look at all 10 of these guys, he's probably like smack dab in the middle, which is a perfect place to be when you've got, perennial All-Stars and Hall of Famers. That's really good company to be in. But I don't think he's quite in the same tier of players that we just talked about. I don't know. What do you feel about that? Am I being unfair? Because again, I'm not saying that he has to be a Hall of Famer to be successful. He's really good right now. Like Dejounte Murray, really, really, really good right now.
Yeah, I think one thing for me when I was mentioning his trajectory and where he's at right now is obviously every circumstance, every scenario is different, right? And I think for DeJounte especially, he came in as such a raw player, especially on the offensive end. I think for him to be where he's at right now, he's matching their trajectory in terms of constant improvement. And as the Spurs' best player, he's clearing away their best player, and he's playing like it. And although the Spurs, like you mentioned, this group is not as good as the supporting cast of a Duncan or a Kawhi or whatever the case may be, right? But considering that, I'm impressed with where he's at, and I think he's on that trajectory of potentially being, that 1B player that we think that he is. Because I don't think he could be, that transcendent, ultra, engine of an offense like a Trae Young or Luka Doncic or whomever, right? But I think right now, for where he's at, where he started at to where he is today, I think he's on that trajectory of potentially being a guy that can be remembered in Spurs history like these guys. Not to say, a jersey retirement guy or anything
I don't know.
that,
honestly, I will say that. I will on the trajectory he's on right now,
Yeah.
if the Spurs end up being good, which I fully think they will at some point while he's here, I could see his jersey going up. I mean, no offense to Avery Johnson and no offense to like the Bruce Bowens of the world, but like if Dejounte Murray's jersey isn't retired by the time he's done with his career in San Antonio, I would be very surprised. And I also would be surprised if he doesn't challenge Tony Parker for maybe that spot as the best point guard in franchise history. He has a long way to go to get there, but as you mentioned, like his trajectory has been really stellar since he entered the league. I don't know if anybody works harder than him. in this franchise right now, or even in the league right now, maybe outside of like the Giannis's and Jimmy Butler's. Like, he's in that tier of like, put your nose down, put your head down, grind it out, put in the work, get in the gym. So yeah, again, I'll let you finish, but yeah, I do think, I wanted to throw out there, I know it might be a hot take, but I do kind of think his jersey will go up in the rafters at some point once he's done in San Antonio. I just think he's too good right now for that not to happen.
Yeah, so we have some middle ground there, as he's clearly, an ascending talent. I think me and you both agree on that. In terms of how transcendent or, elevating those around him he is right now, that's still to be determined, right? But I think, speaking about Tony Parker that you just mentioned, for him, year 5, age 23, obviously kind of a little bit of different scenario here. He averaged 18.9 points, 5.8 assists, 3.3 rebounds, 1 steal per game. I mentioned Dejounte, and specifically that group, why I kind of halved it like that, was because, although you laid it out perfectly for me, I think for Dejounte and where he's at right now, he's the Spurs' best player. In Tony Parker's first year, or Manu Ginobili, another guy that I really love, right? Sean Elliott, those guys were your complementary pieces, and I think Dejounte is that piece for you right now. So, again, back to my trajectory point is, that's where I'm really kind of interested to see where he goes from here. Because right now, I think he's potentially he's going to be more quote-unquote important or quote-unquote impactful if he's going to be the Spurs 1B or, potentially sometimes the best player on the floor, right? But I'm just really curious, Noah, where he goes from here. Because right now, he's playing some really good hoops, man. I mean, his month of February has been, sensational. So I don't know about you, man. I just think right now where Dejounte's at, and as far as where he's going from here, the possibilities are endless. Could he be that guy that we say that we don't really think he is? Sure, but right now, the Spurs do have something serious with him, and if he's that 1B player, man, I mean, like we've been saying, all you need is that piece. All you need is the main entree here, so that's kind of where I'm standing.
And I think that's a fine place to stand, and I want to look at the rest of the first-time All-Stars. And these are not guys who are like LaMarcus Aldridge or like Artis Gilmore, who were All-Stars before they got to San Antonio, and then they get an All-Star. These are guys who made their first All-Star team with the San Antonio Spurs. So looking at the rest of the field, you've got Alvin Robertson, who I think a lot of Spurs fans know his personal drama and everything that happened with him, so we won't spend time on that. But we can talk about how good he was for the Spurs, really from the second that he got here. Year 2, age 23, 17 points per game, 6.3 rebounds per game, 5.5 assists per game. And this last one, I had to double check it because I wasn't sure if it was true. 3.7 steals per game. Dejounte averages 2 steals per game. This guy is almost doubling that, which is, just insane. So Alvin Robertson, we won't spend much time on him, but the other guys I think we're going to be more familiar with. We've got Tony Parker, we got Manu Ginobili, we got Sean Elliott, and all these guys kind of made their all-star team around year 4, year 5, year 3. And for me, I'm looking at them and you go, okay, take Tim Duncan away, take David Robinson away. How good would a team be if Sean Elliott's your best player or Manu is your best player or Tony is your best player? I don't know if there was an extended period for the Spurs where Tony was their best player and they were a title contender. He might have been their best player for a little bit. I don't think they really won anything while he was their best player. I know he won the 2007 Finals MVP, but Tim Duncan was still your rock. Manu Ginobili was really, really good then, all-star caliber as well. Really good supporting cast. And then by the time they were sort of fading out of their stardom, Kawhi Leonard was coming up. You had some of the other guys like Danny Green, Patty Mills, Boris Diaw came in, Tiago Splitter. You had a lot of good pieces around you. So again, their scenario was so much different than what Dejounte's is in. And so when I look at Dejounte, I try to give him the benefit of the doubt because his supporting cast is not bad. We've talked about it before, but you look at it and I don't know how much more efficient he can be. There's not a ton of spacing on this roster. Not a lot of other people have a lot of gravity. There aren't a ton of really good cutters on this team. There isn't really another number 2 option that could really give you give him the ball, let him go score. So looking at it from that perspective, I think if you're looking at these All-Stars, 1 through 10, the top tier is clearly David Robinson, Tim Duncan, George Gervin, Kawhi Leonard. But I think you probably put him in that second tier, and maybe it's too soon, but I think he's kind of in that second tier of guys like Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, and then the very bottom tier, which is still a very good tier to be in. You got Sean Elliott, Larry Keenan, Alvin Robertson. Those are all really special names. And the fact that we're even talking about Dejounte in this context, an NBA All-Star, maybe he makes another game, maybe he established himself as the best player. If he's only ever the second best player on this team and they find a cornerstone elsewhere, that's special. I mean, those are the kind of guys, like we mentioned, those are the guys that get their jerseys retired. Those are the guys that still enter the Hall of Fame, because nobody's going to say, Tony isn't a Hall of Famer or Manu isn't a Hall of Famer just because, Tim Duncan was better than them. That's all right. There's not many guys better than Tim Duncan. So if you're Dejounte and they end up finding a player who's better than you and you're successful, I mean, if you're winning and you win multiple titles, you make multiple deep runs, you can get in the Hall of Fame. You can be a multi-time All-Star. You can have your jersey retired. And so I'm happy with where Dejounte is. He's much further along than I thought he would be. So really excited to see what he does. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about in comparison with these other All-Stars, or do you want to move on?
I got just a couple of just last final points. You're 100% right, especially with a potential All-Star and Hall of Fame case, anything like that, because it starts with the All-Star teams. And even right now, this year, he does have a case for All-NBA third team. I mean, he genuinely does, if you want to call a spade a spade. So, I mean, in terms of individual accolades and in terms of what the Spurs can do down the road when it comes to building around this group, or including him and Jakob, all these other guys, it's definitely possible. And he's definitely in that second tier with guys like Tony and Manu. Obviously, right now, Tony and Manu are better players all time. We're not discussing that. But he isn't, one of those role players like a Sean Elliott, who I do love, and I think Sean Elliott would be a perfect forward for this Spurs team. Don't even get me started on that. That's like the dream forward the Spurs could have right now. But, I think Dejounte really does fit in that second tier. That's where he is right now. And, man, from a guy like that who, I don't know who, even though he is still limited as an offensive talent, for him to come as far as he has, big ups to him, his work ethic, the Spurs coaching staff and all that good stuff. And I'm just excited to talk about the dunk contest, man. I think it's time to talk about the dunk contest. This is a topic that I'm going to hold Noah's feet to the fire on, because he told me something in private and I was like, nah, you gotta come on the pod and say it. So we're gonna change topics here on the and go to the dunk contest. This event has been on a bit of a downward spiral since the infamous 2016 competition between Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon was robbed, and the Spurs have never been represented at this event in our lifetime. I've always wanted to see that, right? I've always wanted to see the Spurs, but it just hasn't happened. So, Noah, out of all of the players on this roster, who do you feel would put on for the silver and black the best?
I think maybe it's a little bit of cap when I say this, but I do think, genuinely, because I told you this and I said I was going to stick to it. So Joe Wieskamp, I don't know if a lot, and if you're laughing at home, that's totally fine. I understand it, but Joe Wieskamp, I'm not sure a lot of people realize it, but at the 2021 NBA Draft Combine, he logged a 42-inch vertical. And they make you do it twice, right? They make you do it twice, and they let you pick the best one out of the two runs. The first one was 42 inches. The second one was 41 inches. I don't think it was a fluke. Now, he's not somebody who can really get up in a crowd. Like Luka Šamanić also had a near 40-inch vertical, but he wasn't dunking over people. And Joe Wieskamp isn't really dunking over people. But if you give him a runway, if you give him the space, I think this guy could hit an East Bay, maybe a tomahawk, maybe a reverse jam. I think there's a lot of things he might be able to do, and we just have never seen him do it. I mean, he wasn't a prolific dunker at Iowa State, or at Iowa, rather not Iowa State. I'm sure Iowa State fans would kill me. Same thing with Iowa fans. But when he was a Hawkeye, not really a prolific dunker. He dunks from time to time with the Austin Spurs. But one of the things that you go watch some of his highlights from college and even some of his highlights with the G League, when this man is running and has a runway in transition and on the fast break, he can get up. He really can get up. And one of the other things that really stands out to me and really stood out to me at Iowa was his offensive rebounding. This guy came in and soared and had putback jams that got every single Hawkeyes fan on their feet. So I don't know if he's necessarily the best guy, but he's the guy who I'm going to advocate for, because I don't think anybody else is bringing that name to the table, and I want to do it. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, that was definitely interesting when you told me that, especially when I found out the 42-inch vertical. I remember on one of your Twitter spaces, you mentioned that you asked, you had a little poll question, because everyone knows you love those poll questions, and they were throwing out every name in the book: Trey Jones, Josh Primo, Lonnie Walker, right? And speaking of Lonnie Walker, I think many would say Lonnie Walker, because of his balance, his athletic ability, he's someone that can get up in a hurry no matter what's in front of him. Although he doesn't initiate contact like we know, he definitely has the athletic ability to do whatever he wants in the air. It doesn't matter what's going on around him. So I could see that, Lonnie Walker potentially for, just bounce sake athleticism. But I think in the dunk contest, me as just I've always dunked. Every time in my life, I have a 51-inch vertical. You know that. As my own, as a dunk contest judge in my own head, I think you need to have a good blend of bounce and aggression, right? And I'm not gonna go with the guy that everyone's thinking I'm saying. I'm gonna go with Dejounte Murray. And
really?
I think
really?
I think Dejounte
Wow.
Murray would do the best because I think Dejounte has a good blend of aggression at the rim, like in a dunk contest setting, of course. I think he'd be really good there. I think he's athletic enough to do it. I think his bounce is there. And I think with how long he is, he could do some wild stuff just on pure length alone. So I think Dejounte Murray would be the best, contestant for the dunk contest. But I could be, talked off that, position. But yeah, man. I mean, we've seen Dejounte too coming. Whenever he was rehabbing, he would do some crazy windmill dunks off the, throwing it up in the air, catch it, windmill. So who knows, man? But I think it would be Dejounte. I might be in the minority with that one, but that's just how I'm feeling.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm going to go ahead and push back on that one hard because I think if you're in the dunk competition, you have to have at least in one point in your career in the NBA posterized someone. We saw Lonnie Walker last year. He absolutely posterized Melly on the Mavericks at the American Airlines Center. Like, if you can do that once, that's it. You get one ticket. That's your one ticket. You posterize someone, you can go to the game. We've seen Keldon Johnson posterize people. We've even seen Joe Wieskamp posterize a few people, granted on putbacks in the Austin Spurs, but I don't think I've ever seen Dejounte Murray dunk unless it's like a fast break or there's a wide open lane. And I think he can get up in a hurry, but I don't think he gets up that high. So that's the only reason I wouldn't put him in there. I think the last time we really saw him like posterize someone or get up for like a really big dunk was like pre-ACL injury. I remember he was working out at Washington. He posted some videos of him posterizing this like 7-footer who was on their team at the time. And I was like, oh man, I'm excited. Like, this is going to be a big season. He's confident. This is going to be fun. And then, the ACL injury happened. I think that sapped a little bit of the bounce, but I think if we have to go on one guy, I'll throw him out there and then I'll let you pick your guy next. If we're really being serious, I probably would not go with Joe Wieskamp. I'm probably going with Lonnie Walker every day of the week. I think he's just a guy who gets up effortlessly, he gets up quick, and he can stay up there. Like, he's got the hang time. So I'm probably going with Lonnie. Who's your guy?
Yeah, I think Lonnie's tough, man. And the reason why Lonnie's tough, okay, because he has posterized people, right? But he just seems so much more of just when he gets to the rim, just a jelly layup. That's all. That's what he wants to do. And so it's just really hard for me, Noah, to envision him as a guy that would just, with force and aggression, look to attack the rim. And like, again, this is a dunk contest setting, so we're not expecting people to, a defender like Rudy Gobert to come out and them dunk on him or something like that. But I think Keldon Johnson, for just aggression's sake, because although I don't think he's going to be flashy enough for the dunk contest hypothetically, but in terms of just sheer aggression and making you say wow or whoa, right? Keldon Johnson's got to be up there as well, man. I mean, we've seen this dude. It doesn't matter what's happening in front of him. If he's trying to go to the basket, he's going to go to the basket. So I think Keldon Johnson's a very fine name to throw into that mix. But, man, I got to say Dejounte, man. I don't know what's up with me, man. Maybe it's because we were talking about him in the opening, but I would love to see him in that setting. And I agree with you, too. It's kind of hard to envision him as well because he hasn't had that spectacular moment, right? But who knows, man? Maybe he's just better in the dunk contest. I don't know. That's just where I'm going with it.
Yeah, I guess you never know. Like, a few years ago, I remember the, TNT, when the Spurs used to be on national TV when they were really good.
Yeah.
They had the, like, plugged-in segment where you get to hear the guys talking or whatever. And even Patty Mills was able to get up for an alley-oop. And I was like, whoa, I had no idea. So maybe Dejounte Murray's holding out on us a little bit. So I won't come for you too hard on saying Dejounte Murray. Maybe he can. Like, maybe he's holding back, and I would love to see really any of these guys because it has just been so long since the Spurs have had someone. I really thought that Jonathan Simmons might be their guy a few years ago.
Yeah.
And, that ship sailed when he signed elsewhere. And I can't really think of any other guy who like could have maybe been in there for them in the past. They've not really ever been a big, dunking team. Maybe David Robinson, but I don't, he never was in that as well. So I don't know. I think the next thing that we're going to talk about here, the 3-point competition, I know it's one of your favorite parts of All-Star Weekend. It's definitely one of my favorite parts of the All-Star Weekend. From Steph Curry and Reggie Miller to Larry Bird and Peja Stojakovic, some of the sharpshooters, like greatest sharpshooters in this league, have had a chance to showcase their marksmanship each and every year. But that said, much like the dunk contest, San Antonio hasn't had anyone represent them in quite some time. So if you had to choose one Spur to send to Cleveland by Saturday, who would it be and why? And they have to be on the roster right now, like not historically, but right now, if you had to pick someone on the roster, who are you sending?
I think it has to be Doug McDermott. I mean, it's really tough because I know he's shooting 44.1% from three this year. That's fourth in the NBA. The reason why I go with Doug is because I like Keldon. I just don't know how good he would be constantly moving from rack to rack. I know it's not like a ton of movement. Like the Spurs aren't running a pick and roll lift and he's coming up off the wing to catch a three. It's not like that's not what they're doing in a 3-point competition, right? But I think Doug he would be better in that situation, in my opinion. It's just really hard for me to envision Keldon because he's a really standard set shot kind of catch and shoot 3-point shooter, and a guy like McDermott I think can relocate a little bit better, and it would probably do a little bit better than Keldon in that competition, in my opinion. But I don't know, Noah. What do you think? It's tough. I want to pick Keldon, Noah. I really do, but I think it's Doug, man. I do.
I would like to pick Keldon too. 105 threes, leads the team. He's shooting 42.5% from three, which is 7th in the NBA. And I know he's made a few more threes than Doug on a slightly worse percentage, which slightly worse doesn't matter because it is so good. Again, 7th in the NBA, but you look at Doug, and he just has so much shot versatility. He can shoot off movement. He can shoot running off screens. I guarantee if you let him shoot off the dribble, he might be able to do that as well. And we know he's an elite standstill shooter as well. So he can just do so many things with the three ball. Quick release. I could see him getting through that. Whereas like Keldon, he sped up the release a little bit, but it's still like relatively slow to the best sharpshooters in the NBA. And just because of that, I have a hard time not even seeing him, make the shots really, because I think he would make his shots, but finish the rack. There's 5 racks, and I think they introduced those 2 extra racks where it's like the super deep ball, because they're trying to show how far guys can shoot now, and that's not really, like Keldon's game. And so for that reason, I just have to go with Doug McDermott. The shot versatility, the percentage is better. And Dame, I know this might be a scalding hot take here, but is Doug McDermott maybe the best 3-point shooter who's ever suited up for San Antonio? And I know we might get a little pushback, or I might for this, but I think he might be the best shooter who's ever played for the San Antonio Spurs. I don't know. That's how I feel. The mix of volume, the mix of versatility, the accuracy. Like, there have been a lot of good shooters that have come through the San Antonio Spurs, and we'll list them in a second. But I think he might be the best one. I'm not saying he's made the most or he's going to be considered the greatest shooter of all time for the Spurs, because I think to do that, you have to stick with the team for a long time. But just individual shooter, maybe the best we've ever seen in silver and black.
That's a very tough one for me. So I think right now I lean Patty Mills just a little bit as the best shooter because I take the size into consideration a good bit, because I think obviously when it comes to just shooting off movement, being able to run all across the court and find a shot, be comfortable with it, relocate, always be ready to catch and shoot. Patty's there, right? He can do just about everything in terms of just shooting the rock. And I think also being 6'1" and really having to rely on some other things around you to get a shot off sometimes, I think for him to be as consistent as he is, being a little bit undersized, and there's plenty of times where he's closed out games for the Spurs, right back in the day. So I think in general, in terms of everything from shooting in the clutch, just pure, because they're kind of similar shooters in my opinion. Obviously, Doug isn't hitting someone with a hezzy and pulling up from three or anything like that. But I think in terms of just off the ball shooting and in general, I think I'm gonna lean Patty Mills just a little bit. But I'm not gonna lie to you, Noah. I know everyone doesn't like Bryn Forbes, right? That's like the whole popular thing. Oh, Bryn Forbes this, or like Marco Bellinelli, right? Or Danny Green. His last year in San Antonio, everyone was like, oh, the Spurs have to get rid of him, blah, blah, blah. Man, they're really good shooters too, and Marco was huge for the Spurs back.
Marco won one. He won the 2014 3-point competition. Like that's in the you're starting to see. Dirk is coming out of the league, but he's still one of the best 3-point shooters. You had guys like Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Kevin Love was in that. He beat out a lot of really good shooters. And let's not forget, people made fun of him because he never set his feet when he was shooting. But it is hard to shoot almost 40% for your career from three when you're constantly on the move. Like, that is a skill. Imagine if he actually set his feet and stood still. The guy would be shooting like 45%. Not in the NBA anymore. I know that he's not a fan favorite and people were ready to see him go, but Marco in his prime, which is like kind of funny to say, but Marco in his prime was
a bucket,
from three.
Yeah.
Like, he was a bucket from three.
Hey, and another guy that's also slept on too, he's still in the NBA, obviously, but Davis Bertans, especially like 2018, 2019 for the Spurs, his shooting ability, he was one of the biggest reasons why the Spurs were so effective winning 47 games that year. I believe that's what they won. It was because the Spurs, although they were such a low-volume team from deep, they were like the number one, number two team in terms of just pure accuracy from hitting their shots from deep, and Davis was a huge part of that. So I think you have to throw him into the mix too in terms of just best shooters in Spurs history. Of course, Bruce Bowen from the corner. I mean, growing up, Noah, when you saw Bruce Bowen flare to the corner, you knew it was a bucket. You knew it was three. You know what I mean? So I think it's been really interesting, right? Because the Spurs have always been that team that's been late to the party, right? In terms of adapting, making the modern game, really buying into that, right? But they've really had some quality shooters in the building, and it kind of makes you wonder, right? Like, what if they kind of went a different direction at some point, right? Like, how good of a 3-point shooting team would they have been? But that's kind of where I'm heading off here, man. I would love to hear any closing thoughts from you, and we can get into the next one.
Yeah, so one thing that I thought was really interesting, it doesn't have a lot to do with necessarily like the three-point competition itself. I'm pretty sure Bruce Bowen was never in it, but one of the things that always sort of like left me dumbfounded was the 2006-2007 season. Bruce Bowen led the NBA in three-point percentage, shot over 44% from three, but he became the only player in NBA history to be number one in three-point percentage and last in free throw percentage in the NBA.
What?
Like, the guy shot like, I think it was 44% from three, but 56% from the line. And that was just among qualified players. Like, there were a few players who had like 5 or 6 free throws all year and they made one. This is just out of like qualified players. So I always thought that was really weird. Just sort of like a little fun fact to throw in there for Spurs fans, because we all remember Bruce Bowen as that guy, the sniper from the corner. He absolutely was, but what a weird year to lead the NBA in three-point percentage and finish last in free throw percentage. I don't know if that's ever going to happen again. Other guys who I wanted to give love to real quick, and we'll move on. Sean Elliott, we know he's a great three-point shooter. Everyone remembers that, Memorial Day miracle. That was huge. Spurs don't win a title without that. You talked about Davis Bertans. We won't spend time on him, but Steve Kerr, Matt Bonner, Brent Barry, those guys were all really good three-point shooters. Like, there have been so many guys who have come through here, and that's not even to mention a guy like, Steve Smith. I bet you there's probably Gary Neal, exactly. Roger Mason Jr. Like, there's so many guys who were so good at shooting the three ball. Most of them I remember as standstill shooters, and so to go back to the original point, I still got to go with Doug McDermott. Like, there's just too much shot versatility. I know that there's definitely an argument for Patty Mills. I will not argue against that. There is definitely an argument, and the NBA seems to think so. He got an invitation this year now that he's not with the Spurs. That more has to do with his percentage being up, his volume being up. He's starting a ton of games for the Brooklyn Nets, who are supposed to be a title contender. So I understand it. It's a little annoying that he's not there, but I understand the argument for Patty. So, if we're going to close it out here, I'd be fine with saying Patty and Doug are on the same level. But man, like, the Spurs have such a good history of shooters, and it just makes me excited to see what they can do going forward, because they have the Dejounte, they have a Devin, and we'll get into that later. But I love that they've had so many good shooters. I just want to see somebody in another competition, and we'll move things on to the Rising Stars game. And I know we keep complaining, we keep talking about this and that, but we've seen Keldon Johnson, Jonathan Simmons, Kawhi Leonard, Tiago Spiller, Gary Neal, DeJuan Blair, Beno Udrih, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, you name them. They've laced them up alongside some of the best rookies and sophomores in the NBAs over the years, and the Spurs looked like they might be getting another guy, but one of their youngsters got snubbed this year. Devin Vassell did not receive an invite to the Rising Stars game. I think it shocked Spurs fans. I don't know if it shocked everybody else, but it definitely shocked me. It shocked you. So how do we feel about the NBA snubbing San Antonio's second-year swingman, despite him putting up some really solid numbers for the Spurs this year?
Noah, I'm shocked. I'm shocked. When I saw it, I was like, yeah, there ain't no way Devin Vassell's not making that. I mean, especially for, media members or whomever votes on this, right? It's media members or, whomever comes up with this. Just look at, the numbers. If you just watch Devin Vassell play, he's one of the best sophomores in the league. I mean, in just terms of impact, versatility, just being whatever a team needs. Man, I don't understand how he's not in there. I mean, the Rockets, they got Jae'Sean Tate in there, Alperen Şengün, Jalen Green. I was shocked. I mean, Jonathan Kuminga and Bones Highland nominated as injury replacements. Like, respectfully, Bones Highland over Devin Vassell, Jonathan Kuminga over Devin Vassell. Like,
but I think the only reason they did that is they were trying to even it out with the rookies. So like those are rookies who got hurt, so they're replacing rookies, right?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But I just think in general, Noah, like, I just can't believe it. Maybe I'm just being, a guy that's a little bit biased, whatever, and just because I watch the Spurs. But I think in general, Devin Vassell, when you compare rookies, sophomores, whomever it is, he's one of the better young players in the league. And in terms of longevity, being in the NBA, like, I think we can say it now, he's gonna have a 10-year career, as long, God willing,
bare minimum.
Doesn't get injured. He's gonna be there for a long time. He's gonna be an important player for wherever he goes, right? So I think just in general, maybe it's because the Spurs aren't winning as much, but even then, man, I mean, you have guys like Tyrese Halliburton, who I really, really like, right? He's on a bad team, right? He was on a bad team, who still kind of is, right? You have guys like LaMelo Ball, who's a lot more flashy, but the Hornets have been struggling recently. So I don't know if it's really wins and losses. I'm just confused, Noah. Like, I don't know how this happened. Like, I would think Devin Vassell would make it.
And the NBA just, honestly, not even just for this event, but for all NBA teams, all defense teams, all-star game, rising stars, and anything that has to do with these front court and back court designations where we're forced into picking front court players to participate in these sort of things or reward them for something. Get rid of it. The NBA is moving positionless. We see guys who are 7-footers like Jokic and Embiid running offenses, taking the ball up the court. We see guys like Keldon Johnson, who probably like 3, 4, 5 years ago would have been considered like guards, 6'5". Now he's playing power forward. There isn't positions anymore. There aren't positions anymore, rather. So you need to get rid of that because, okay, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, Tyrese Maxey, LaMelo Ball, maybe even Cole Anthony with the Magic. You could say that they're having a better season and that they're more deserving than Devin if we're just looking at the backcourt, and that's what the NBA did. But you can't tell me that Precious Achiuwa, Isaiah Stewart, or Jaden McDaniels are having a better season than Devin Vassell. That's not true. So you get rid of those front court, back court designations, Devin Vassell makes the game. It's that simple. If you want the best players in the game, not just the All-Star game, not just the Rising Stars game, anything, you want to give the right players the rewards and accolades that they deserve, you get rid of those. It's been time to get rid of those. And like you said, does it have to do with winning or losing? Evidently not. Like you mentioned, Jae'Sean Tate, Alperen Şengün, and Jalen Green from the Houston Rockets, worst team in the Western Conference, they're in the game. Like, I understand it. They're all really good, solid young players, but Jae'Sean Tate would not be playing this much for another team. He wouldn't. The numbers are there. He's fine. He's somewhat efficient. He's not a really good three-point shooter. He's a decent defender. He's really physical. He makes loud plays like a Keldon Johnson might, but he's not as good as Devin Vassell. He doesn't deserve that over Devin Vassell. So for me, really, if the NBA cared that much, if we're being honest, Devin Vassell has played a lot of 3 this year. That's a forward. And last time I checked, forwards are in the front court.
Yeah.
So why not replace Jae'Sean Tate with him? I just don't understand it. It frustrates me, and not just from like a fan perspective, because again, we try to be unbiased. We try to be more like the media. We're media, right? We're not supposed to have an opinion like, oh, this guy deserves it because we cover this team and we're fans of this team. No, when we say he deserves it, it's because he deserves it. And he really does. You look at his body of work, and there's no reason he shouldn't be there.
And to your point as well about the positions and everything like that, I mean, it's nonsense. Like, I believe even DeMar DeRozan's considered a guard, and he hasn't played guard in like 5 years. Like, he doesn't even play. He's played more power forward than he has guard since like 2017. Like, no, the NBA needs to get rid of it just completely. Like, just put the best players out there, man. Who cares what position they play? If you have 15 centers making All-NBA or All-Star, then you have 15 centers doing it. Like, who cares, right? I agree with you 100%. No, I just think it's ridiculous. And trust me, if Devin Vassell was playing for, I don't know, whomever you want to think, if he could be playing, wherever, I'd still be like, yeah, he needs to be in this game. Like, he's just that good. He's that impactful. He's a guy that I've said is, in terms of value to the Spurs, one of the most valuable players, especially in the long run. Right now, he's very impactful. He's played very well, since entering into the starting lineup. Something that, wink, wink, if you want to check out my articles on Pounding the Rock, you can see that. But yeah, man, just in totality, Noah, I think it is nonsense. I was shocked when I read it, and even after like injuries or whatever the case, right? I just can't believe it, man. I'm still kind of in disbelief. Like, I'm like, ain't no way they're going to play this game without Devin Vassell.
And you know what? If somebody, like, if they get a cold or maybe they, like, trip and they sprain their ankle, mild sprain, we're not hoping for real injuries, knock on wood, whatever. Maybe they just tweaked it a little bit. But Vassell should be on a plane tonight to Cleveland if any sophomore has to drop out of this game. It tips off at 8, so if something happens, they better be calling Devin Vassell. They better get him a ticket. They better fly him out to Cleveland. They better get him in the arena, and he better be playing in the game. But, that's probably that's not going to happen, and he's not going to get another opportunity to be a rising star because, it's only for first and second year players. But just because he's not in this game does not mean he's not a rising star. He has been very good for San Antonio this year. He's made some really big developmental strides. Really proud of the progress he's made, but I think we got to continue. Otherwise, I'm going to be frustrated.
Yeah.
And again, not to continue the complaining here, but the next event on our slate, it's the skills challenge, and I can't help but feel like the NBA also got this one wrong with their participants. Dejounte Murray, one of 5 players averaging at least 19 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists per game this season. Man, he's not one of the guys in the competition, and there's a lot of guys who didn't make it, including every single one of those guys I just mentioned who were in that category who averaged 19, 7, and 7. We're looking at the LaMelo Balls, Luka Doncic's. We're looking at James Harden's. Obviously, he couldn't participate because he's hurt. Honestly, wouldn't want to see him participate either way. Nikola Jokic. Why are none of these guys in the competition? A skills competition. It's for skills. Clearly, they have a wide array of skills, so why are they not there?
Yeah, I was honestly a little bit surprised here as well. Now, I understand, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, because it's in Cleveland, right? They're going to be there, obviously. Yeah. I'm not going to lie, though, Noah. I like Jared Allen as a player. I'm a little bit shocked that he's in the skills challenge, respectfully. I was kind of scratched my head a little bit on that one. And then, the Antetokounmpo trio, Giannis, of course, everyone wants to see him, but his 2 brothers, respectfully, again, they're in the NBA. God bless them, happy for them. But no one really is interested in that. I'm with you. I think if you're going to be in the skills competition, you need to be a guy that stuffs the stat sheet across the board. Someone that literally does things that require multiple skills, right? There's a reason why Jordan Clarkson's not in the skills challenge or something like that, right? I don't know. No, I don't get it. I don't understand why they wouldn't put him in there, and especially with a guy like Dejounte who's really starting to ascend and be on national, TV segments sometimes, or he's getting talked about a little bit more, right? Bringing more attention to the Spurs. This is a good time for the NBA to really start to buy into another, to the small market like the Spurs that already has championship pedigree, and really start to push that as well. And for some reason, it just seems like the Spurs just constantly get overlooked. And this isn't even me coming from, a fan perspective. It's just kind of genuine. The Spurs just aren't discussed. And now that, they actually have a really solid player, an all-star caliber player, you would think they'd get a little bit more love because, we've seen players that make the all-star teams or that make the all-star list or whatever or in these competitions that are on bad teams, Noah. I love Bradley Beal, right? And I understand they're in D.C., but, man, the Wizards are the 3rd or 4th most important team in that city, right? And he gets talked about so much, right? So I don't know about you, man. I just can't believe this one either.
Dame, it is All-Star Weekend. So like you mentioned, Darius Garland, Mobley, Jared Allen, 2 of those guys are All-Stars. Evan Mobley is going to be an All-Star one day. They're playing in Cleveland. They're the stars of the show for the Cavaliers, so I get it. I totally understand it. The Rooks team, you've got Cade Cunningham, Scotty Barnes, Josh Giddey. I get it too because the NBA wants to put their up-and-coming young stars on the national radar. Totally understand that. The Giannis thing I'm still stuck on. Giannis is maybe going to be the face of the league. I don't know. He seems like he's the best player in the league right now. When LeBron retires, who's the face of the league? Maybe Giannis, right? So if he's the face of the league, you want to market your best player to everybody. You want to make sure he's at the forefront. Totally get it. I think there was a better way to do it than putting him alongside his brothers. One of his brothers, Alex, he doesn't play. He does not play, okay? He doesn't play for any team. Neither does Thanasis. Thanasis is playing for the Bucks, but he doesn't really play. Like you said, respectfully, he is there because of his brother. And Kostas, he's in the G League. He hasn't even played an NBA game this season. So, like, I understand marketing your best player in the league. This is not the right way to do it. For me, a team of Dejounte Murray, Luka Doncic, LaMelo Ball, that would have been so much fun to watch. One, they're all legitimate all-stars, and as I mentioned, it is All-Star Weekend. So if it's All-Star Weekend, why not put all-stars in the event or future all-stars in the event? And two, they're all triple-double threats every single night. I know that we've talked about, the triple-doubles overrated, this and that, but I mean, if the people love triple-doubles, give the people what they want. Give them 3 triple. That's a trifecta of triple-double threats. Give them what they want. So I don't know. It's not like it's the biggest deal. The skills challenge isn't something that people remember for years and years and years. I think Tony Parker won it twice, and I don't know if, most Spurs fans could tell you that. Like, not everybody's tuning into this, but it would just be nice to see San Antonio get some representation in this, because if the All-Star Weekend is for All-Stars and it's to spread, your reach across the league, when you exclude certain fan bases and you include the big market teams like the Lakers or the Bulls or the Knicks when they're not deserving of it, those teams don't need help. They don't need help to spread their outreach. The Spurs do. They're playing a fun brand of basketball, even if they're losing. They've got a lot of intriguing young pieces, even if they're losing. Help them out a little bit. Throw them a bone, because it makes it more fun to cover this team when you see them going to All-Star Weekend. And I know they're bad, but they're just as deserving as a lot of these other teams, like you mentioned, that are just as bad as they are. But they're getting the shine. So a little frustrating, but I'll let you take us into our next topic, because I know we've done a lot of complaining. I think this was the perfect episode for us to just vent a little bit and sort of imagine what this team could look like. But I'll let you move us on to the next topic.
Yeah, so we've talked, about plenty of events and, who should have represented the Spurs in each of them. But to be honest, man, San Antonio's one-way ticket to All-Star Weekend has always been sending someone to the main event. Dejounte Murray got there this year, and the Silver and Black have some intriguing young pieces on the roster. And, man, I don't know about you, but I love a good wrestling story, right? I love a good storyline. I love when the main event is there, right? But it takes 2 to tango. So just in general, man, the question, who's going to be San Antonio's next All-Star? Will it be, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, maybe Josh Primo, or is that All-Star coming from the NBA draft or free agency? I want to hear you first.
That's such a tough question to answer. I really like a lot of these young pieces. For me, Keldon Johnson is someone who has made a lot of strides as a shooter, but he still leaves a lot to be desired. I mean, even though he scored a lot in that Thunder game, and you could say, he dominated that game. He really finished really well at the rim in the most recent Thunder game. Thunder were playing without 3 members of their starting lineup. They were missing 2 of their leading scorers, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Lou Dort, and they didn't have a center to protect the paint, so of course he's going to finish better, right? And even without that rim protector, Keldon Johnson turns the ball over 4 times, and for me, that's the next logical progression, is he's got to become better at making decisions with the ball in his hand. We know he can get to the rim. We know that he can absorb contact. We saw him get to the free throw line 7 times, and that is great. That is really encouraging, because most stars get to the free throw line. But he's going to need to add something else. He can't just be a standstill shooter who's sporadic as a driver. Just not going to work, and he's a subpar decision maker. It's just not going to work. So for me, Keldon could be that guy, but he's probably not. You look at Devin Vassell. He's not really a great passer, although he just had a career-high 6 assists the other night, so shout out to him. He's trying to make strides there. But I still need to see more off the dribble. I still need to see more diversity off of his shot. So for me, it's probably not Devin either, though I really like Devin. If I had to pick one person, it's probably Josh Primo. I know we were all hesitant about him coming into the year, but he's shown a lot of dynamic off the dribble moves. He can create for himself. He can create for his teammates. He's got that pull-up three-pointer that no one else on the roster really has, and I know he's inconsistent right now, really on both ends, but he's shown a lot of flashes as a defender. He's a good weak side rim protector. He doesn't commit too many fouls, and he just has that special quality that it's almost like unquantifiable and indescribable. But when you see it, you know you've seen it. You know what I mean? So
I know
for
exactly
me,
what you mean.
Josh Primo is the guy. I'm not going to say he is going to be the guy. I can't guarantee that. But if anybody has a good chance to do that, I think it's Josh Primo, which is why I'm so excited to see him for the rest of this year with the San Antonio Spurs. But I said my piece. I said who I thought it would be. So I want to hear who do you think it would be?
Yeah, echoing your point, especially about the kind of those things where when you just see it, like, you just know, right? When you see something, you're like, that's exactly what I mean, right? And Primo's the only guy that I think on the roster that has that potential. Like you mentioned, man, in terms of just the more modern game, the more modern guard feel, Primo fits everything you want, right? In terms of his play style, off the bounce as a creator, he kind of gives you a little bit of everything that you're kind of like, man, if we can kind of refine some things, if we can fine-tune some things, he can really fit being that primary creator for you. It's going to take some work, right? And he's very young. We know this. But I think Primo's that guy that has the actual ceiling to be an all-star guy. And I think, all things being equal, hypothetically, if he doesn't end up tapping into that potential, he's a guy that could be a perennial all-star if we're calling a spade, because his game is not only that too, man. His game is could be really polished, really well, and impactful. But to be an all-star, especially to catch the casual fan's eye, you got to be flashy, right? You got to do some things that catches the eye that you just come back and say, man, he's just like that. Man, that was nice. He's just nice. And Primo has that ability. He has that potential, right? So I think if it's anyone on the roster, it's going to be Primo. I love Vassell. I think as a shot creator, and again, that flash, you need to have something, right? I don't know if Devin Vassell is going to have that. Keldon Johnson, for me, I think he's really, really solid in the role he's in. I think Jakob Poeltl, probably not as well. I think it's Primo, Noah, and if it's not Primo, then it's going to be someone from the draft or free agency, in my opinion. If the Spurs, hypothetically, I'm sure when we hit May, June, we'll talk about this more. If the Spurs get a Banchero or a Jabari Smith or Chet Holmgren, right? Those are guys that could be all-stars, in my opinion. I think right out of the box you can expect that, right? But right now on this current team, I think it's Primo, man. I think it's the Primo picks. That's just my opinion.
I love that. I love Primo picks. I think that we're both on the same page here. I think it is probably Josh Primo, but as we've seen with guys like Dejounte Murray, like probably 3 years ago, if they had asked us, who's the next all-star on this roster, you would have said nobody.
Yeah.
Like Dejounte had the all-defense, youngest all-defensive team member in NBA history. I think he was all-defensive second team his second year. But that didn't signal that he was going to be an all-star. And he's put in work, and he's come back every single year, add a little wrinkle to his game, and, all of a sudden he's an all-star. Could Keldon do that? Could maybe Vassell do that? Sure. I don't know if you want to bet on that because that sort of work ethic, that's outlier work ethic. We talked about it. The Giannis's have that. Guys like Jimmy Butler have that. Guys like Kawhi Leonard have that. But not everybody's built the same. Not everybody's like DeJounte, and it's the same way that you see, reason you see him out there every single game, and when he's on the court, he's the leader. He's vocal. He's holding people accountable. He holds himself accountable. He's the first person he will blame if the Spurs lose, even if he has like a stellar triple-double that's super efficient, 4 or 5 steals. It's on me. It's on me. So I don't know if everybody's built like DeJounte, but I think the same thing can be said for Primo. Not everybody's built like Primo. He's got some really unique characteristics that make him a really dynamic scorer. And if he can learn to be a better decision maker, kind of improve the dribbling, it's not that he doesn't have a dynamic ball handle package right now, but I think it's more that he's a little loose with the ball at times.
Yeah, not as tight. Yep.
So if he can tighten that up and he can figure some other things out as a decision maker and he become a little bit stronger, add some more weight to his body, that way he can draw contact, get to the line. I could see it with Josh Primo, but I think that's it on the All-Star talk. Let's go ahead and wrap things up and talk a little bit of legitimate basketball here. The Spurs are in the middle of their annual Rodeo Road Trip. They're 3-2 with only 3 games remaining until they return to the AT&T Center. How are we feeling about San Antonio and how they've performed on the Rodeo Road Trip thus far, and how do you see those last 3 games playing out? Let's start with the first question.
Yeah, I think for me, Noah, right now where they're at is it's interesting, right? Because they're 3-2 right now. They've lost to 2 teams that are better than them, and they've beat 3 teams that at this current stage they are better than, right? They're kind of where they should be, right, in terms of who they're beating, who they're playing, who they're losing to. I think some people are kind of really, interested to see what's up with Lonnie Walker because recently he's been playing some really good hoops. Hopefully, maybe this is going to be, the turn of something because the Spurs need it. And quite frankly, I think just for, being where he's at right now, they're going to need him to, show a little bit more. I know from 3, he's still kind of struggling a little bit. I mean, against the Pelicans, he's 1 for 5. Against the Bulls, he was 2 of 4. Then against the Thunder, he's 2 of 7. But overall, he looks a lot more comfortable out there, right? It looks like the game's coming to him a little bit easier. He's really just taking everything in stride and going with the flow of things. But I think in general, this team is kind of where they should be, right? Especially after the move that they've made. I don't think that anyone should be too high or too low. They should just kind of be even keel and just understand, like, yeah, they're better than, the bad teams in the West or the East, but they're not as good as a true playoff contending team. And I know the Pelicans are quote unquote there, but let's be honest, Noah. You know what I mean? Let's call a spade. So that's kind of where I stand on it, brother.
Yeah, I think I'm probably in the same ballpark as you. I want to be like the resident realist of like Spurs media. I don't want to feed you any lies. I don't want to tell you, just because the Spurs have the best net rating in the NBA since the trade deadline happened doesn't mean they're turning a corner and all of a sudden, they're going to go on this magical run. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to knock off the first seed as the 8th seed. I really don't think that's going to happen. You look at the teams that they lost to. They lost to the Cavs, which is fine. The Cavs are a really good basketball team. They have a lot of good young talent. They're a matchup nightmare for the San Antonio Spurs between Darius Garland, Jared Allen, and Evan Mobley. That's just a tough group of guys to guard. Not to mention they have Karis LeVert, Rajon Rondo's in there, shoring up the second unit. Even Isaac Okoro's really solid for them too. So, I'm not surprised that the Spurs lost to that team. That's a good team. But that Bulls loss, I know people want to say, they only lost it, down the stretch once DeMar DeRozan took over. I don't care. That team is missing Alex Caruso, Lonzo Ball, Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, Javonte Green, their backup power forward. He was a game-time decision. They didn't even know he was going to play until the game started. You were fully healthy outside of Trey Jones in that game. You had every opportunity to win it. You couldn't stop DeMar DeRozan. You couldn't stop even Ayo Dosunmu, who's, by the way, is playing really well for the Bulls right now. If there's a rookie to watch, he's one that you should definitely be watching. He fell way too low in the draft. Should have been a first-round pick, but that's neither here nor there. Just those 2 losses, you should expect them. You should expect those losses, but the wins, they're not really as impressive as you might think. You play against the Hawks. Yes, they made the Eastern Conference Finals a year ago, but they're 3 or 4 games under 500. They've won 9 of their last 12 games, so they're trending in the right direction. But you also had a play in which John Collins and Keita Bates-Diop collided. John Collins is their second best player. He goes out for the rest of the game. Keita Bates-Diop is just a replacement level guy for you. So now it's all on Trae Young. You have a bunch of guys who you threw at him. By the way, you still had Derek White at the time. This is before the trade deadline. I mean, you stop him, you cut off the head of the snake. Of course, the rest of the team was going to fall apart. They're the second worst defense in the NBA. So of course you put up 135, 136 points. Credit to you. You had to do that. But it's a lot easier when you're playing a really, really bad defense. You go and play the Pelicans. They're not very good either. They're just in the same position you are. Yes, they added CJ McCollum. Yes, they have Brandon Ingram. The rest of that team isn't that good. There's a reason they're that far down the standings. And as far as the Thunder win goes, I saw a lot of people celebrating that win, but man, you almost blew that game at the end. So no offense to the Spurs. Really happy that they're able to pick up a little bit of momentum because you're going to have to get wins here and there and build some confidence and keep your chin up, even in a season that you might end in the lottery and pretty high in the lottery. But that Thunder game, you're playing a team that has Lindy Waters. Dame, have you ever heard of Lindy Waters III?
No.
Can you tell me where that man played college basketball?
I cannot. Lindy Waters?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, he logged 20 minutes against the Spurs. He also played semi-professional basketball. He was on a tryout with the Oklahoma City Blue, their G League team. He only played 5 minutes per game over the first half of their G League season and just recently started shooting the 3 and from free throw and from the field, just lights out shooting. And they said, yo, we need somebody, so, come play for us. He's playing, I'm going to go ahead and do this. I know that this is probably a little bit unfair, but I'm going to go ahead and throw some names out there, and you tell me, do you know that guy? Is this a real player, or is this fake?
Let's do it.
All right, so we had Lindy Waters. All right,
no.
So you didn't know who Lindy Waters is, and that's totally fine. Do you know Diakite? You familiar with Diakite? Do you know where he played college basketball?
No, I do not.
Do you know if he was drafted or not?
I would assume no.
Okay, well, yeah, he wasn't drafted, and he was formerly on a 10-day contract, and he played basketball at Virginia. I only know that because my fiance's sister went to Virginia, so we were a little bit of basketball fans there. But no, guys should not be playing basketball. Neither should Lindy Waters III. And I'll go ahead and throw another name out there. Kenrich Williams. Do you know who that is?
I've heard of him. Yes, I know who that is, but I don't know much about him. But
yeah, he went to TCU. He went to TCU. He was solid there, but he didn't play the other night. But I mean, he's not very good. But that's a guy who's in their regular rotation.
Yep.
What about Isaiah Roby?
Yeah, I know who that is, and I know he's played for them too, and he shouldn't probably be.
Do you know Vit Krejci?
No, I do not.
Okay, so I think that proves my point. Yeah. So I think my point is here, you should not be celebrating a win in which you are fully healthy and the other team is missing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, and Lou Dort. You should have blown that team out of the water. I'm glad that Josh Richardson got a chance to play. But I really would have liked to see Tomas Satoransky and maybe even Romeo Langford get a few minutes here or there before the Rodeo Road Trip ended, before the All-Star break. And because it came down to the clutch, you didn't get to see them. It should have never come down to the clutch. So just tough for me to celebrate those wins. And so when I look at people sharing, the Spurs have the best net ratings since the trade deadline, man, who cares? They've played some really bad teams. That's what you're supposed to do. And the Spurs, they're bad. They're down there. Like, they're down bad in their record. And they're going to end up in the lottery, but they're not as bad as the Thunder. Like, their expected wins versus expected losses, they're supposed to be over 500. The only reason they're not is because they've been so bad in the clutch. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm being too much of a pessimist, but I do think being realistic about where this team is better for fans than telling them, they're going to the finals, or, oh, man, they're going to make that run to the playoffs. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. If they do, I'll eat crow. I'm 100% willing to eat crow if that happens.
Yeah, and also shout out to Vic Krejci. It's Krejci, I remember when you said the name, when you said Krejci or whatever you said, I was like, oh, okay, I know exactly who that is. I know exactly what that name is, where it comes from. But what's it called? Yeah, I agree with you, brother. I think right now they have 3 games remaining: the Wizards, the Heat, and the Grizzlies. I think they're going to go 1-2. I think they're going to lose to the Heat and the Grizzlies. I think they're going to beat the Wizards. And I think that's kind of just how this is going to end for them. Is they're going to beat the bad teams that they should beat, and they're going to lose to the good teams that they should lose to, if we're being honest. That's just kind of where the Spurs are at. It isn't, anything against them, but it's reality, right? Call a spade a spade. This is where this team is at. Again, not a bad thing. You can listen to our trade deadline episode again if you kind of want to listen to the mentality of this team coming into this year from our perspective and kind of where they're headed. I think this is fine. Where they're at right now is fine. Beat those bad teams. Be competitive against the good teams. And, hey, whatever happens this year, you're not preparing for the finals or the playoffs. You're playing the long game now. Now we're looking for things that are beyond this season, right? So I think right now the Spurs and where they're headed is a couple of losses to the Heat and the Grizzlies, a win against Washington. And, I mean, they're going to round out over 500 for this Rodeo Road Trip, yeah? Or no, they'll be right
makes them 4-4. They'll be right at 400.
They'll be right at 500.
Or 500, sorry.
Yeah.
500.
Yeah, and I remember, a couple months back when we were talking, back in December, I said the Rodeo Road Trip could possibly be the end, right, for whatever they were going to do. They went ahead and did some trade deadline stuff, obviously, but I think just in general, being 500 from this break is, it's as well as you could imagine for a team that's not going to make the playoffs. So I think all in all, man, where the Spurs are at and kind of with the state of this team is a little bit of the same.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't think that there's been any major change in expectations for this team. I don't think the trade deadline made them, so much better than they were before. It's about who they've played, how they're performing. I'm proud of what they've been able to do. And whatever they do for the rest of the season, I'm going to be happy with. Because I think when you look at the Spurs, it's a win-win situation really no matter what. For the most part, I would say it's going to be a win-win situation. So I think, Dame, if you're good, I think that about does it for today. So thank you so much for hopping on the pod with me. Why don't you go ahead and plug anything you want? Let Spurs fans know where they can follow you on social media, where they can find all of your fantastic basketball and or football content.
Yeah, guys, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. That's at DA Bartonek. That's at DABARTONEK. Check out my podcast. Check out my Washington Words, Spurs Words. Check out everything we got at, SB Nation, Pound of the Rock, man. They're fantastic, brother. So I'm going to kick it to Noah, and he's going to close out the show for us.
Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter at @N_Magaro, Magaro. And you can also find my Spurs Words at Pounding the Rock, some of my videos where we do Spurs film studies over on YouTube. It's just my name, Noah Magaro-George. But again, thank you so much for joining me, and thanks to everybody who tuned into this edition of Alamo City Limits. And for those of you listening at home, make sure to subscribe, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. We've got a fantastic staff of writers over at Pounding the Rock who do a wonderful job of keeping everybody up to date with their favorite team. So check our stuff out. But until next time, Spurs fans, take care.